the cycling podcast in association with Rapha. From grand tours to group rides, the Champs-Élysées to coffee shops, Rapha exists to celebrate the world's most beautiful sport.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Daniel Friebe.
Hello.
Sorry, you looked at me there, Daniel. Was that okay?
Where's Napalm?
Napalm is ill.
Is he really?
Yeah, we're a man down. Yeah, he was supposed to join us this morning, but he's not well.
What's up with him?
Coughing and spluttering, he said, which we don't want.
Was it Napalm that did the big bike ride last year? The big yellow bike ride? Or
last week?
Last week, sorry.
I mean, do you... You were here. You were sitting opposite me when
I can't remember.
you surely saw my white face at the prospect of this. We'll talk about that a bit later, obviously, Daniel, about the bike ride last week. But how are you? We're in London still. You're still
fine.
here?
Yeah, on the way to the airport.
Wintering in London?
No, I'm on the way to the airport. But anyway, more about this bike ride, Rich.
I'll come to that. I'll come to
News
that.
roundup.
Okay, well, the bike ride, I mentioned it last week. It was a Rapha organised bike ride, 100 miles from just outside London to near Bath. Beautiful, beautiful countryside. Very nice day.
I heard you had an early bath.
We were joined by Tom Southern.
Did you finish?
Sports Director, Education First. I didn't quite finish, but I did more than I thought I would, and
You thought that it was 100 kilometres.
Percentage of the ride than Lionel achieves accuracy in his news roundups. I did 70 miles.
How many kilometres is that?
It's 110 kilometres, something like that.
You brought up a ton. You raised your bat toward the pavilion.
Reasonably happy, but at the same time a little bit depressed because, as you know, Daniel, I used to be very fit.
Used to be a baller.
And now I'm very unfit. And it's been a process over the last 10 years, which I keep meaning to reverse.
Got another big season in you? One last rodeo?
I never quite get round to it. Maybe next year. In the absence of Lionel, I guess I'll have to do the news roundup, unless you want to do it, Daniel. Do you?
No.
Well, we've had quite a lot of racing. The season is finally petering out now. So we had the Tre Valli Varesini, won by Tom Squinge. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Of Trek Segafredo, Latvian rider who's had a really good season, won quite a few races. Thibaut Pinot was second, offering a clue as a glimpse of his form. Peter Kenyuk was third. The big race of the week, of course, was Il Lombardia, Tour of Lombardy, and that was on Saturday, and it was won by Thibaut Pinot.
What about Milan-Turin?
Milan-Turin, I forgot about Milan-Turin. This is why we need Lionel.
Gran Piemonte.
Who won Milan-Turin again?
Thibaut Pinot.
Thibaut Pinot, of course he did. That was a wonderful performance by David Gaudu, I thought, who took out Miguel Angel Lopez on the climb, didn't he?
It was like, did you ever play the computer game Speedball, where you were allowed to take out your competitors so that teammates could prevail? Anyway.
Well, Lopez, who's won that race before, was moving up the outside, looking like he was about to attack. Gaudu, who'd done an amazing ride, actually. I mean, fair play to him. He put in an incredible ride on behalf of Pinot. Swung off just at the moment Lopez drew level and just took him out. It was a proper body check. Pinot, would he have won anyway? I think, I don't know, because Lopez got back up, came back pretty strongly and finished second. Would he have won?
I think he would have won. Valverde was getting dropped at that point and Lopez wasn't exactly following the wheel, or he looked as though he might struggle to follow the wheel, and then Gaudu did his linebacker's duties, and that was it.
Could we see this in cycling? Could this be a new tactic, do you think? Could this catch on, the body check? Anyway, that was Milan-Turin, or Milano-Torino. Lombardy was the big one, of course. Thibaut Pinot, an amazing win. We'll talk about Lombardy in the first part of the episode, and we'll talk a lot about Thibaut Pinot. We'll actually hear from Pinot as well, an interview that he gave Orla Chinoui at the World Championships recently. Second was Vincenzo Nibali. Third, Dylan Toynes. Fourth, Rigoberto Urán. Fifth, Tim Wellens, who is riding home back to Belgium with Thomas de Gendt from Lombardy, which is an interesting endeavour. What other races have there been? Well, one or two. Presidential Tour of Turkey, and Sam Bennett won 3 stages. We'll have a package from the Tour of Turkey from Hannah Troop in the final part of the episode, but Sam Bennett did extremely well out in Turkey, winning 3 stages, as I've said. The winner overall was Edward Pradis, but it was really Ali Hodge of Scotland won a stage as well, but it was Sam Bennett finished his season very strong with the 3 stage wins. We'll hear from him in that package in the final part. What other races have we had, Daniel? The Hammer Series. How could we forget the Hammer Series? A bit of controversy in Hong Kong. with Quick Step relegated in the Hammer Sprint. Did you hear about that? Patrick Lefevre, for the second week in a row, very unhappy.
Well, he was very much in the news this week, wasn't he? Because
they have a new sponsor.
Arguably the biggest piece of news of the week, apart from Lombardy, was Quick Step Patrick Lefevre unveiling a new sponsor for next year. And Rich, that sponsor is called
De Koning.
Yes, indeed. Can't wait to see what the Quick Step riders look like next year. But a bit of controversy in Hong Kong, because the Hammer Series is all about reaching a new audience, isn't it? And it seems to have got bogged down in a bit of complexity when two of the Quick Step riders, Dries de Venens and Fabio Jakobsen, punctured, rejoined the race. So they were effectively a lap down, but carried on winning points. This was only discovered after the race, so they were relegated, Quick Step, from the victory, but it all sounded very complicated. Mitchelton Scott won the Hammer Chase. They won the race overall, with Quick Step Floors second and Bora Hansgrohe in third. So that was the Hammer Series. We had the Chrono des Nations in France, the old Grand Prix des Nations. And then the Chrono des Nations, well, I was surprised that Vincenzo Nibali went straight from Lombardy to ride there. Why did he do that? He was 8th.
Why do you suppose it might have been, Rich?
I don't know.
Well, it is a strange one. I would imagine there was some kind of incentive of some description.
No,
I don't know what.
Daniel, what are you suggesting?
Well, I was suggesting his palm might have been greased.
Not just for the love of it.
By someone or for some reason.
Finishing 2 places ahead of him, Sylvain Chavanel in his final race before he retires. The race was won by Martin Toft Madsen. It's not quite the race it once was, the Chrono des Nations. In the women's race, Olga Zablinskaya was the winner, with Emma Cecile Norsgaard Jorgensen in second and Audrey Cordon-Rigaud in third. So that's pretty much the racing. As you mentioned, Quick Step have a new sponsor. We did actually include that in last week's news roundup. It was slotted in later on, but obviously big news and a big sigh of relief for Patrick Lefevre and everybody at Quick Step, who will now be able to apparently keep Fernando Gaviria and Enric Mas, among others.
Although, Rich, I understand that the UAE team, and as we're recording now at the time of going to press, we don't go to press, we go to the studio, the mixing lab. UAE are still very confident of signing Gaviria, so it would not shock me at all if he left Quick Step.
A community around the world. Stories and films with the most compelling characters. The world's finest apparel. Explore the world of cycling with Rapha.
Thank you very much indeed to our headline sponsor, Rapha. We've already covered the Rapha ride that I disgraced myself on last week. I'm going to go back next year. Maybe joined by Daniel and Lionel, who knows?
Unlikely. Simon
Mottram, the Rapha founder, very keen to see Daniel and Lionel on a bike at some point. Just FYI, Daniel. So we'll work on that for next year. We'll go back and give a better account of ourselves, I think. We included last week the news that Rapha are obviously joining forces with Education First, EF Education First. And, quite a lot of buzz around the alternative calendar that they're going to be pursuing, in addition to the World Tour calendar, with some riders doing races that are literally off the beaten track and a little bit different. Tom Southern, as I mentioned, was on the ride last week. I spoke to him a little bit about that, and there's quite a lot of excitement. It's mold breaking, and we're going to follow that with interest. In fact, it ties in nicely with a new podcast series that we're going to be producing and coming out very, very soon. Stay tuned.
Rich, it did occur to me that the ride Connor Dunn and Larry Warbass ride, the No-Go Tour that we covered in Friend Special and was covered extensively on social media, had got an awful lot more publicity, certainly on social media, than a lot of official UCI races this year. And the same applies now to the endeavour you mentioned earlier on the part of Thomas de Gent.
My ride?
No, Thomas de Gent and Tim Wellens riding home from the Tour of Lombardy. And what are they calling that? What's the hashtag? It's one last break? One last break?
I don't know.
Or final breakaway or something along those lines?
I pity Tim Wellens riding back with Thomas de Gent. Is he going to be able to rein himself in? Is he not just going to be attacking him constantly? It sounds hellish. If you're going to do that sort of ride with anybody, do you want to do it with Thomas de Gent? Really? But no, I mean, what this is about is pro riders sort of reconnecting with cycling as an activity, as a means of travel.
You're teeing up a fantastic segue into Thibaut Pinot.
As a way of adventure.
The man who goes on training rides without a spare inner tube and phones his mum if he punctures, and she comes to pick him up.
No Ubers down that way, no. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about that. I mean, that sounds to me like the opposite of what we're talking about. Is it not? I don't know. Anyway, he doesn't just fill his tires with grass or something, does he? Real old school. But no, I mean, there's a sort of movement here, and you're right. I mean, the Conor Dunleary Warbass feeds into this too, and I think there is an appetite for. I think we talked about this a bit next week, and I think we're going to talk about it a lot more. And it does tie in also with Paris Tours and other races, you know, leaving the main roads and finding new tracks and, you know, trails to follow. So yeah, that's a sort of metaphor for maybe where the sport is going. Who knows? Watch this space. Tour of Lombardy, though, Daniel, no goat tracks there.
But a goat fancier as the winner.
Well, we'll hear a bit about
recently
Thibaut Pinot and goats
in the cycling podcast
a little bit later on. But it was a great race, wasn't it? And coming of age for Pinot, he can now reflect on a really strong season, especially at a strong end of the season after, you know, at the Giro riding so well for all but 2 days and going home in a very, you know, bad state, and to the point where you would have, you know, been concerned about his health for the rest of the year. But he's recovered really well from that, and 2 stage wins at the Vuelta, and now a first monument.
Yeah, he's had a dream season, really. It could the only thing that would have really improved it would have been finishing the Giro on the podium, which he was pretty much in contention to do. There was one mountain stage left, of course. When he had his big collapse, he collapsed on that mountain stage. He won the Tour of the Alps before that. He came back. He was third, I think, in the Tour of Poland, and 2 stage wins at the Vuelta, 6th overall in the Vuelta, and then won Milan-Turin and Il Lombardia, the Tour of Lombardy, and has looked like the strongest rider, the strongest climber in the world in the last few weeks. So much so that watching Lombardy at the weekend, I did have some pangs of regret, and I think he does as well, about the World Championships, because the batting order, the French team at the World Championships, we discussed how well they'd ridden. It didn't quite come off because Alaphilippe wasn't on his best day, but the batting order really was Pinot, Bardet, Alaphilippe, and Pinot did his big effort at the bottom of the Grammont Boden, the really difficult last climb there, and then sort of passed the baton on to Bardet. I think if that order had been reversed, Pinot was possibly the stronger of those 2 riders. They were both stronger than Alaphilippe on the day, and who knows, Pinot could have been able to drop everyone, including Michael Woods, including Alejandro Valverde, and he's probably not going to get many more opportunities to win a World Championships, and that might have been one of them.
What about the race itself, Daniel? Because we've seen this is, I mean, a pattern really in a lot of races this year where the big selection has come pretty early. 45 kilometres to go. Primož Roglic attacked on the Sormano, and that really initiated all the action behind. Nibali and Pinot went after him. Egan Bernal then joined up on the descent, which I wasn't surprised to that. He's come back pretty strong, but I guess what impressed me there was his fearlessness on the descent after having a couple of really nasty crashes this year.
On the very notorious descent as well. The descent where it was Jan Bakelants and Laurent de Plus had a terrible crash last year.
Yeah, that was quite reassuring to see, because you always fear that somebody who's had a couple of nasty crashes, albeit not on descents, and albeit on both occasions not his fault, most recently at San Sebastian, but pretty severe injuries he suffered there. So he's obviously back to full fitness and fearlessness, and so he joined up with that group. It was quite surprising then to see Bernal get dropped on the final climb, as Roglic, I think, had made a big effort and began to pay for that. But Bernal, I was surprised that he wasn't able to stay with Pinot and Nibali, and up that climb it was like bare knuckle fighting. Pinot was just taking lumps out of Nibali, who responded each time and looked pretty smooth, looked good. And they're both riders, I guess, who've had setbacks this year, injuries or illness, and they've come back and finished the season pretty strongly. Nibali, of course, won the race twice before, but Pinot knew he had to get rid of Nibali, didn't he? And eventually he did. But when it came, it was quite a surprise, I thought.
Yeah, it was. He didn't really have to attack at a certain point. Very close to the summit of the Civiglio, actually, it looked as though the hard work had been done by Nibali, and he only had to really grit his teeth for another few hundred metres, and then he was over the top, and it would have been very difficult for Pinot to drop him from that point. But Pinot had obviously stretched him to breaking point. I think the big difference, obviously, between Bernal, and the other two was lack of racing on Bernal's part. He had that terrible crash in San Sebastian and hasn't raced an awful lot since then, whereas Nibali and Pinot had the welter in their legs, and also lots of racing since then. There were some concerns when the route was unveiled this year that it wasn't going to be as hard as a traditional Lombardy route because the San Fermo della Battaglia climb was taken out, so that would have come after the Civiglia, would have been the last climb, largely by virtue of Nibali attacking early on the Muro di Sormano. That wasn't the case. It was a very hard race pretty early on, wasn't it? From 50 k's to go, the battle really commenced between the top guys. Tactics came into it up to a point. It really was the strongest rider who prevailed. Pinot just had to unhinge Nibali with attack after attack. It was interesting that that's what it took in the end, wasn't it? It was probably the fourth or fifth acceleration in the end, or slight acceleration that got rid of Nibali.
Nibali's not one of these guys who looks like he's struggling, but you got the sense that Pinot picked up on something, because he sort of attacked from the front, and when he went, Nibali just looked empty. I mean, he looked like me after about 45 miles last week. Just, the energy left his body, and he looked on the verge of collapse. And what was surprising him was that when he was caught by the group behind, he went again, which we very rarely see, and he won. He was second. I think a really significant factor was the team tactics that benefited both of them was Bahrain Merida. The numbers they had behind, Ioni Zagiri and Domenico Pozzovivo were both there playing a very prominent role in sort of marking anything.
And Franco Pelizzotti, whose
was there for quite a while,
on Saturday.
Who's becoming a DS, isn't he, for the team?
He is.
He was there quite a long time, but I felt Pozzovivo especially looked very fresh and very able to respond to anything, and that just made things a little bit more difficult. Behind Dan Martin had a few goes, rode pretty well, but I think that played into the hands of the guys up front, and obviously the one thing they couldn't influence was Nibali and how he rode, but he comes out of the race with a great deal of credit, I think, to finish second after a difficult second part of the season. It's easy to forget that he started the year by winning Milan-San Remo. It might, for those with short memories, it might not seem like a great season, but he did. He added that monument to his palmarès. Was unfortunate at the Tour de France. His kind of attitude and demeanour disappointed me at the Vuelta. He was incredibly tetchy, didn't want to answer any questions about his back or his front, which, as I say, was slightly frustrating for those having to deal with him in the press. But he showed his class, didn't he, at the weekend. It's going to be interesting next season because in 2015 when he won the Giro. Corrections corner, 2016. We suggested that the manner in which he'd won that Giro maybe indicated that it could be his last Grand Tour win. It's his last to date. I'm still not sure that he's got another one in him. I mean, it obviously depends a lot on routes, and it depends which riders decide to do which Grand Tours next year. But I certainly can see him contending for Liège again next year, again San Remo and Lombardy. But I sense that his career is going more and more in that direction of one-day races. He's sort of playing a bit of brinksmanship at the moment with Bahrain Merida. It seems he's got another year in his contract. They've offered him, I think, another year after that. But he's talking about joining Team Sky. What? Yeah, he's talking about joining Team Sky, He said that in an interview a few days ago. He did. Cheer. I think it might be with Stephen Ferrand for Cycling News. We'll look at that. How odd. Yeah, no, he's openly courting offers from other teams, which always suggests that that's just a way to try and get another year, at least, out of his existing team. He almost joined Team Sky, of course, 2010, when they offered him €1 million to become their GC leader in their first year. He turned it down, so he said, that he is open. Come and get me. He's issued a come and get me plea to Dave Brailsford.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, cycling podcast team car at the back of the pack, please.
The familiar voice of Seb Piquet, the voice of race radio, of course, at the Tour de France, reminds me to tell you that this week's episode is sponsored by Harry's Razors, and there's a trial set available to listeners to the cycling podcast. The Harry's Razor pack includes everything you need for a close, comfortable shave: a weighted ergonomic handle, 5 precision engineered blades with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel and travel blade cover. Daniel, sitting opposite me, you're not much of a shaver. You're a stranger to a razor. You're looking quite fuzzy. but I have been using my Harry's razor for several months now, and as you can see, pretty smooth. It's an excellent razor, and if you do return to shaving, I highly recommend it. As I mentioned, there's an exclusive offer available to listeners to the Cycling Podcast. Get started shaving with Harry's today by claiming your trial set for £3.95. Support the Cycling Podcast and get the trial set delivered to you if you're in the UK. It includes the razor handle, the 5-blade cartridge, the foaming shave gel, and the travel blade cover by going to harrys.com/cycling right now. That's £3.95 for the pack. And if you go to harrys.com/cycling, you can claim it today. Well, Daniel, I mentioned that Orla spoke to Thibaut Pinot when we were in Innsbruck for the World Championships. This was before the race, but she asked him a bit about his season and, importantly, also about the Strava art, the goat that he seemed to draw on a recent training ride.
I wanted to know the inspiration behind the goat. Could you tell me about the goat you did on Strava?
It was a beautiful coincidence. Yes, I didn't draw a goat. No, it was pure chance and that's it. It wasn't badly done though. I was quite proud of myself.
So it was someone else who noticed it?
Someone let me know pretty quickly that it looked like a goat. And it's true that on a second look, I saw that it looked like a goat. To draw a goat for 210 kilometres isn't bad.
And what about the season in general? How would you say the past season has gone for you?
The season I've just done in 2018, for me it was a good season. A season in which I performed at my big targeted race. My only regret, which will perhaps stay with me for my whole career, is the podium I missed at the Tour of Italy. But there you go. That's a part of my story, my history. Perhaps I'll never get back to the podium of the Giro, so it's frustrating to think that. I'll go back to the Giro, but whether I get on the podium is another question.
For next season then, you're thinking about the Giro first and foremost?
No, not the Giro, because next year I'll want to go back to the Tour de France at 100% of my ability. So I'll try to go back to the Tour de France at my best. For now, I'm coming back from a long way. I was in bad shape and went to the Tour of Poland, the Vuelta, and I'm still motivated, really motivated for Lombardia. I'm also looking for revenge for my Giro. It's maybe that as well. I want to prove to myself and enjoy myself on those beautiful roads for the end of the season.
That was Thibaut Pinot there, denying that the goat was a deliberate drawing, that it just happened sort of spontaneously in the course of a 210 kilometre ride. Are you buying that, Daniel?
Well, among the adjectives that come to mind when I think about Thibaut Pinot, spontaneous is one of them, Rich, because I think it's one of the things that I appreciate about him. Other people appreciate that. He's very uncontrived in an era when a lot of riders, are very conscious of their image and what they do on social media and how they appear. Pinot is not like that. As we know, his great passion in his life is his animals, his donkeys, his goats, his chickens. I think he's got some chickens. He's got that in common with Lionel. And, well, of course, that association, the goat association, was one reason why we suspected that it had been deliberate what he did on Strava the other day.
He's also mercurial, is the other word you could use for Thibaut Pinot. He's capable of looking like the best rider in the world, as he did in Lombardy. He's also capable of completely collapsing, and I guess this, when he says there to Orla that next year is all about the Tour de France, going back there 100%, you wonder if victories like that and performances like he's managed this year are going to take away some of the doubts that he clearly has about his own ability. And let's not forget that one of those doubts was about descending. One of his Achilles heel, or his real Achilles heel, a few years ago was descending, and we saw him keep up with one of the best descents in the world, Nibali, never in any trouble on two very difficult technical descents in Lombardy. And so, he's capable of addressing these problems and overcoming them. But is there still a doubt that Pinot could go to the Tour next year and either be the Pinot that won Lombardy or the Pinot who was off the back in the Tour on a flat stage a couple of years ago, throwing his bike away and spitting out his dummy?
Well, Rich, I think the big doubt that I've got is that the fun factor, and he's someone who has made no bones about the fact that he performs best, as most guys do, but him more than others maybe, when he's having fun. He loves riding in Italy. You only have to see him, speak to him at races, to see that he has a whole different demeanour and body language at Italian races. You know, you go to the team hotel on rest days and he'll linger with journalists or members of the public, and he'll be very relaxed and talk at great length about the race and other things. Whereas at the Tour de France, he sometimes looks like one of his frightened animals, and he doesn't relish the stress, he doesn't relish being the centre of attention. He's different, very different from Bardet and Alaphilippe in that respect, and he loves races. Well, we all know he loves hilly races, but he when he talks about the Vuelta and the Giro, he talks about the fact that it's often in Italy there is no real valley road or flat road, even on relatively flat stages. Most of the time you're going up or down, and that's different from the Tour de France. Tour de France, you know, tends to stick to the bigger roads, and often you do have days where it's very flat and it's very fast, and a lot of concentration is required, and it's very stressful, and he doesn't enjoy that. And I just worry that when he goes to the Tour next year, that the stress and the pressure will kick in, and it won't seem like quite so much fun as the Vuelta did this year and the Giro has in the past. But it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because he's got a French sponsor. He's got the most, the proudest Frenchman anyone could possibly imagine. Marc Madiot is his team manager. Marc Madiot had a career where he didn't particularly excel in France in Italy or Spain. He was very much French focused, wasn't he? And the whole team is, but you've got Pinot, who's this outlier.
Pinot, the other thing about him is he's sort of relatable too. He doesn't look super skinny, you know, his body shape hasn't changed in the way that some riders have. We have this sense of him, you know, going out at home and carving goats into the landscape and riding, as you say, without a puncture repair kit and without a map and without a phone and you know, all the other accoutrements. Does he go to altitude? You know, is he somebody who does that?
He's done that a bit more in the last couple of years. He spent some time in Gran Canaria, and I think he's been sleeping at altitude there. He's definitely done a couple of altitude training camps, but that was new to him. And you know, he's a rare sort of star rider who has carried on living where he grew up in the Vosges Mountains. He hasn't gone to Monaco or Girona or you know, anywhere else where the training conditions or the tax conditions might be more favourable. He stayed near his family, and he's kind of he's a bit of a throwback. He's a bit of an adventurer. You get the sense that he loves riding his bike first and foremost, more than he loves racing perhaps. And he loves climbing mountains. He loves conquering mountains. He has this sort of explorer's spirit, and you know, he has vulnerabilities. We talked earlier in the year about how sometimes he seems to get certain things in his head, like his inability to cope with the day after a rest day, or certain weather conditions that he doesn't do well in. The heat, for example, at the Vuelta, you got the impression that he was defeated a few days in when the temperature gauge never fell below 30. He'd already talked himself out of it, and you know, the Tour de France demands 23 days of full concentration, full focus, with a lot of noise around you, and that's my doubt. I mean, he has done it. He's put together a brilliant Tour de France once. In 2014 he finished third. His other tours he's shown flickers of brilliance, winning stages. Won at Alpe d'Huez. He won a stage in his first tour in 2012, but he struggled to put it all together, and you know, I just worry that it might be a missed opportunity again, depending on who decides to do the Giro. But I feel that still represents his best chance of a Grand Tour win, particularly when we already know the first time trial of the Giro is going to be uphill in Bologna next year. There's going to be another time trial of the Giro to San Marino, and that's going to be, the last half of that is going to be mainly uphill as well. So already that's two good reasons to look at the Giro. Having said that, he's a guy with a big enough engine to do 2 Grand Tours a year very well. So he could do the Tour next year and then go and do a very good Vuelta as well.
I guess what we saw on Saturday was, you know, a very gloriously attacking performance, and when he's put in, you know, when he's won stage and so on, it has been with real panache and aggression, and I guess that those are qualities that aren't necessarily compatible with a Tour de France win, which is really all about conserving and managing your effort and and not riding like that. Perhaps, with maybe doing that on one stage to gain the advantage that you need, and then protecting it and defending it. And maybe that's where he struggles physically. You could imagine things falling into place a bit like they did for Geraint Thomas this year, where he rode a perfect race, and you could imagine Pinot with his talents winning a Grand Tour, winning the Tour de France in an exceptional year, like a 2014.
Yeah, I just worry about his ability in the first week to make the splits, if there's wind, if the in some ways the trend in Grand Tours and the trend in the Tour de France is going in his direction. It's favouring him. They're more and more sort of gimmicky, if you like. There are more and more steep climbs. There are more and more climbs in the first week. However, there are other sort of obstacles that are being thrown into the Tour, like we saw this year with the pavé, and we've seen other years with stages that go along the coast and there are crosswinds. And even in the Vuelta this year, there was a day where he was caught out. In the only real crosswinds we saw at the Vuelta, he was caught out, and that's still a bit of a recurring theme. Having said that, he's only 28, and the next 4 years are going to be his best years, and it's not impossible that he could iron out some of those flaws, that in the same way that he ironed out his weakness in descending, which no one ever mentions anymore. And in fact, at the weekend on Saturday, partly because he was fresher than Nibali, but he was taking time out of Nibali on the final descent off the Civiglio. So we shouldn't underestimate his ambition and his ability to carry on improving. He's got a very good team around him. His brother Julien and the other coaches at Group Arm FDJ, they've done a great job over the last few years at addressing weaknesses, addressing the team's weakness in time trialling, for example. They did a brilliant job of that. They've addressed weaknesses in Pinot's entourage, so he's got a very good group of climbers around him now, with Reichenbach and Morabito. And
Gaudu looks like he, next year he could step up as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a bit of a shame that the team without Pinot didn't ride a slightly better Tour de France. They got a stage win with Demar, but if Demar had won 2 or 3 stages, then you kind of feel that would have taken the pressure off Pinot having to do the Tour de France. And you look at it, as I say, as a French sponsor, a guy who's ridden the season that he has this year, and you would say we need to have that guy at the Tour de France.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport. Fueled by science.
So the question today for Dr. Rob Child at Science and Sport is from Steve Nichols. Hi guys from New Zealand. I love the podcast and enjoyed reading the history of how it came about. I use my daily commute as a training ride, 60 minutes in the morning and 60 to 90 minutes in the evening. At the moment I consume a small bowl of muesli and a coffee. It's 6 a.m, so milk is permitted before heading out the door. I have a light snack, say a boiled egg and some toast upon reaching the office. As per every competitive cyclist, I'm always looking to be as lean as possible. My question is, should I be eating before I ride to work, or should I focus on eating once the ride is finished in order to maximise both weight loss and recovery?
Hi Steve, thanks for that question. The scenario described actually is very common for a lot of riders looking to juggle work, training and a family life. If you're looking to be lean, I'd suggest having the boiled egg with your muesli before heading out, and then having a Science in Sport Whey 20 gel and toast when you reach the office. These small changes will help your muscles recover more effectively, so you can push it a bit harder on the ride home. And they'll also help you feel fuller for longer when you're at work, so you don't overeat.
Well, thank you to Science and Sport for supporting the Cycling Podcast, and thanks to Steve Nichols down there in New Zealand for your question to Rob Child, their expert. Hope his answer was interesting and useful to you. Science and Sport was certainly useful to me last week on my ride. Don't think I would have got as far as I did without Science and Sport products. And you can get Science and Sport products, as many as you like, with 25% off at scienceandsport.com with the code SISCP25. That's SISCP25. Now, at the World Championships recently in Innsbruck, I spoke after the Under-23 World Road Race Championship title race to James Shaw, who was 10th, a strong ride in what's always a really competitive race. asked him a bit about that. But the interview was revealing of other things, not least that he has lost his place in the Lotto-Soudal team. He'll not be offered a contract next year, still only 22, so very young to be left without a team. And when we spoke to him at the start of the year, he talked about the UCI's cut in team sizes in Grand Tours and big one-day races, and how that would affect a young rider like him. And it's not the desired outcome for him at all, and he is left looking for a team. He rode Il Lombardia at the weekend and unfortunately crashed and broke his collarbone, so his season ends on a real bum note. But the interview, we thought we'd play it this week because he's a very interesting talker, and he said a few interesting things about team sizes, about riding for yourself, in a race like the world title race, having performed a team role all season, and one or two other interesting comments as well I thought he made. Here he is, James Shaw. James, that was a hard race, obviously. Talk us through it as best you can.
Yeah, without doubt, hard race. One of the hardest races of the year. The course itself played possibly the biggest part of the day. As a team, we were there or thereabouts all day. It was just that last climb just escaped us. Those leaders just went up a little bit too quick, a little bit too fast, just especially on the steeper sections for me to go with it. Of course, from the top then, it was a matter of chasing to try and bring something back for Ethan, and unfortunately we could only manage an 8th, and then I was 10th myself, but 8th and 10th at World Championships, it's not what we came here for, but we're not going to go away too disheartened. It's not something to be that disappointed about.
How difficult is it? And you'll know a lot of these riders quite well, but you've never raced against them in this type of race, and you've got a mixture of levels as well, but you're used to different sorts of races that are raced in a different way.
I think me personally, me being able to race myself is something that I don't get very often. I spend a lot of time on the front riding for Lotto, albeit that's about to change as they've announced they won't be renewing my contract for 2019. So I got the opportunity today to race myself. I got the opportunity to put myself first instead of putting others in front of you, and I enjoyed to have a different style of racing, a different crack at it, and I think I sort of regained a little bit of confidence in myself with a 10th. Okay, it's nothing to it's not taking the world by storm, but it's a move in the right direction for me. It's
I didn't know that you weren't staying with Lotto. What are your plans for next year?
Try and find something if I can. As of yet, I can't say anything.
Are you optimistic? Are there are there places out there? Are there teams out there?
Yeah, there's contacts, there's talks going on, and there's regular phone calls, emails, various things going on. But it's a matter of finding the balance, of being able to develop in a team where they're going to move you forward. And I know my under 23 years at Lotto were absolutely brilliant. On the team of Kurt van der Wouwer I would say that is the best development team in the world, the under 23 team at Lotto. I cannot say enough good things about Kurt and the opportunities he gave me. So I'd be looking forward to next year and see what comes up and see what the next chapter holds. It's writing a book, and you never know what's going to come next, sort of thing.
Are you disappointed though? Because I guess, when I spoke to you at the start of the year, you talked about how the change in team sizes this year was making life a little bit more difficult for young guys like you.
Yeah, I think it's a knock-on effect of what the UCI have done, really. They've taken everything down from taking a man out of every team, sort of thing. So Grand Tours have gone down from 8 from 9, and the proof is me. It's made it even harder for young aspiring riders to get places on professional teams, and they're not. And the sport's getting harder as the sport is getting closer and closer to nearly being perfectly clean. Okay, we've unfortunately we have the odd little disappointment every now and again, but as the sport gets cleaner and cleaner, it gets more and more competitive as the playing field gets leveler and leveler, you know, and it means younger guys that maybe aren't quite at their physical peak, such as myself, struggle to make those big races now that the UCI have taken everything down to taking a man out of every team, you know, so it's getting ever so hard now to become a professional rider and stay a professional rider, and it's a tough world at the minute. It's a tough industry, really is. And you know, no, I don't think anyone ever expected the sport industry to be easy. Everyone knew it was going to be tough, but it's really. I mean, it has its dips, doesn't it? Some years 2 or 3 teams pop up, and you know, it's really good for. But at the minute, this year, a lot of riders seem to be struggling, and like I said, I'm one of those riders that's it's a little bit left in the dark at the minute in terms of what 2019 will hold for them.
So that was James Shaw, who I think speaks very well. He's on the lookout for a team and wish him the best of luck. I mean, he's still very, very young, and it is a shame when guys like that who've had the experience that they've had are, you know, find themselves kind of on the scrap heap a little bit at a very young age. You know, Lotto-Soudal bringing in Caleb Ewan, Adam Blythe is joining that team. He's been around the block a bit, Adam Blythe. And I guess what they're looking for teams is that sort of experience now, that proven ability. You know, Adam Blythe can do a job for Caleb Ewan. He can be a good lead-out man for him. Whereas James Shaw is a more kind of, you know, developing talent and a climber and somebody who rode well at the Under-23 Championship. He was 10th there. But, you know, it's interesting as well talking about how making that adjustment from riding in a team role all year to then riding for yourself at the World Under-23 Championship is quite strange.
Yeah, and it's difficult often to know, you know, these guys who have been employed mainly in domestiques roles, it's very difficult to know how well they've done that job. James Shaw's finished a lot of races in his 2 years as a professional. I spoke to him for the first time at the Dauphiné last year, and he was doing very well there, and his team were pretty happy with him, but it's tough, and you know, you often get the feeling that there are maybe 200 riders in the World Tour whose abilities are very, very similar, and they're almost interchangeable, and they can become quite disposable at certain times if the market moves in a certain way. And this year, with a combination of the change of rules, so one less rider in World Tour events and one day events and major tours as well, then that's put the squeeze on them, and there are other factors as well to do with teams closing, and it's become quite a tough environment for that category of rider.
He was 21 when I spoke to him at the start of the year. I should have made clear he's 22 now, but still very young. But best of luck to him in looking for a new team. Another James Knox rode extremely well to the Tour of Turkey. He got his chance riding for Quickstep again, team role all year. Got a chance at the Tour of Turkey and performed pretty well there. He's one of the people we'll hear from in this package from the Tour of Turkey from Hannah Troop. Shall we cross over to Turkey now?
One thing that I've noticed about the Tour of Turkey is, from a journalist point of view, it's a good race to cover, in the sense of it's almost like going back old school, or what I can imagine is old school. At the beginning and at the start of the race, the teams are actually sat out. They have minibuses that have taken them down to the start of the race, which is kind of unheard of. They've not got their big, usual, hunkering, massive team buses with everything that they need on there. So they actually are sat out round their buses at the beginning of the race. So it kind of definitely feels a lot more relaxed, a lot more chilled out. And I guess that's the other thing with it being the end of the season. There's a lot more of that kind of feeling around the race. Got a lot of different vibe to it to some of the other races that you go to, where everything is a lot more hectic and chaotic.
I'm Tristan Hoffman from Team Bahrain Merida, and I'm DS.
And how is Tour of Turkey going for you so far?
Good. It's a nice country. I was here 5-6 years ago, but And I like it to come here. Okay, we had some travel in the start, but now we stay on the coastline every time, and we have sunny weather. So, and it's the last race for me for the season, so looking forward for the next stages.
And do you think this is something that all of the teams are starting to feel, that it's quite late on in the season right now?
Every rider's looking, because they had already a busy season, they've been working hard, so everybody's looking forward for the time off, absolutely. But we try to finish this race in a good way.
I'm Wilfried Peters, and I'm the sports director of the team Quickstep.
So Wilfried, how are things going so far, Tour of Turkey? Obviously this is a good week for you with announcing the new sponsorship. So,
okay, well, very important information of us. I think Patrick worked hard on it. Only thing is we need to wait a long time. Okay, on the end we fixed it, and we are very proud about it.
And how has it felt over the last few weeks? I mean, there must have been quite a lot of angst within the team, obviously trying to secure it for next year.
Yeah, okay, we have a contract for next season, but Patrick worked for later, for 2020 and 2021, and I think I'm never afraid about him. I worked 25 years together with Patrick, and I can wait. That is not a problem.
And when you see this week things like the announcement with EF Education First and what they're looking to do with their race programme for next year, what do you think? What does the team think about things like that?
I want to know the numbers of the riders. Maybe we have only 23 or 24, and then we can only do 2 programs. And then this year was a very, very heavy program. Sometimes we did 3 programs on the same time. Okay, we won a lot of races, so now we have 70 races. Maybe for next season it's more or less, and then we need to cut some races.
Today is the Queen's stage, which is stage 4. It's from Marmaris to Selçuk, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm sure I need to get Rob Hatch pronunciation police onto that one. But where we're finishing today is a big old climb up to the finish line, and then just at the top is actually the house of the Virgin Mary, which is quite incredible, depending on what religion, or if you have a religion or not. It's one of those places where you come to and you forget that this area has so much history to it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens today's stage, whether Sam Bennett will keep hold of the jersey. He's got 28 seconds on some of the best climbers. Our guessing is that he might not, but we'll have to wait and see. So James, how was that today?
It was okay. It was exciting to start with for the first 20k. Then we had about the most boring 160k of my life, just rolling around on these flat Turkish roads. And then it all got really exciting for the end, but a little bit disappointed. I kind of felt like with the headwind, I'm not really strong enough to like jump out you saw everyone was just sort of stuck together, and it all came down to that final kick, and I haven't really got a kick, so I was just following, and I didn't really have a chance to like launch early. So 4th, I guess, is a pretty good result. My best result of the year anyway, so I'll take it. But
that's not a bad result for the Queen stage of the Tour of Turkey anyway.
Yeah, no, it's not bad at all. I mean, I really thought I had a chance at the win, so I was going to go for it. I did actually lose some time first stage, so I'm still not going to be. I reckon I'm not even going to be in top 10 on general, but and the worst bit is that I agreed to a bet last night where if I didn't win today, I can't drink on Sunday night after the race, so I've really messed that up now.
Is there any way that you can redeem yourself to reverse that?
I don't think there is, to be honest. I think it's done now.
And so what's the plan for the rest of the week for you then?
Well, this is my shot. I'll be getting bottles now. Trying to help the lads a little bit for the sprint. There's not really much for me to go at. Just ride slowly into the off-season.
So how are you feeling today, Sam, after yesterday?
Yeah, I'm okay. Used a little bit of my energy trying to control the race at the beginning, and then I had a long way to the finish, but normally 200k is okay, but this time of the year it's a bit long. But it should be okay today. Hopefully I'll be there at the end.
Did you come into the Tour of Turkey feeling strong and that you were going to have the success that you did?
I don't know, like I did train really hard for this, and I did do the work, so I was confident that I'd be close, but I didn't know how close, because it's a different field compared to last year, and last year I just kind of got everything my way.
And how are you feeling in general? Sort of the race, the sprints in the first few stages were a bit chaotic. How are you feeling during those?
Yeah, I was a bit nervous. Yeah, there's no flow, there's no rhythm, and it's just it's hard. But so far it's been okay. I can't complain. But yeah, it's a bit strange. Like even the last sprint we did when Trekker had their train up and running, there's guys pushing Degenkolb off his train, and you usually just don't see that. It's a bit strange. Like, it's happened to me, it's happened, I don't know if it's happened to Quick Step guys, but there seems to be no respect for teams in this race or trains. But then I wonder, is it something to do with a lot of riders needing a contract? They have nothing to lose and just going for it.
Once again, I've found myself in a desert-like location for you guys. I'm not complaining though. Turkey has been pretty spectacular this week. It's the first time I've ever been here, and yeah, there's been some amazing landscapes, and coming up into Istanbul today was really, really spectacular, winding up the city to these absolutely huge mosques on top of the hill. It's really, really beautiful. So it's been one of those weeks where there's been a lot of riders complain about the safety of the race sometimes. I was speaking to Kiel Reinen after the race today, after the last stage, and he was saying how since it's changed event organiser this year, you can really tell the difference, and that there are a few things that they need to tune up. But he said, you know, you don't want to have to complain about it the whole time. It needs to be constructive criticism that they give back, with the hope that the event organisers take that on board and then they make it better for the next year. The other thing as well that you notice about this time of year is that there's still some riders who are actually out of contract for next year, and one of them is Matteo Pellucci, and you know, he's only 29 and he's worried. He's worried that he's not got that contract next year with Bora, and he's still got to find somewhere. So there's a real kind of nervousness as well around the people who haven't signed their contracts yet, because things are still uncertain, and the less races you get towards the end of the season, the less chance they have to show themselves off to other teams to potentially get that contract for next year. So it's kind of a race where there's quite a lot of different emotions, I guess. But on the whole, it's been a great event that Turkey have put on, and yeah, bring on some more deserts for next year, shall I say?
Well, thank you for that, Hannah. I'd say James Knox featured in that package. I've got a longer interview with him to play over the winter at some point. I saw him in Girona recently. We've got a few interviews, longer interviews with riders coming up over the next few weeks, take us through the off season. But there's always plenty to talk about in cycling. There's always stuff happening, isn't there? But Daniel, you've got a plane to catch, so you better go.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Bon voyage.